live now, or 40 seconds after live, as it were. And I can see we've got quite a few of you now logging as we speak. So what we'll do is we'll just get started. But at the same time, those of you who are joining us right now, if you could just introduce yourselves in the chat and tell us a little bit about yourselves, that'd be great. So a little bit about what you do. Let me just share my screen. Sorry about that. I forgot to do that.
I want to also say, Rupert, that if there's comments coming back, then I'm controlling Rupert Honeywood's comments at the moment on the system. So if there's anything that you don't like, then it's me who's doing it. So not Rupert. You can blame me.
The way the software works, unfortunately, we're not able to. We're clones of each other, so I'm afraid you guys are two of us instead of one. Two for the price of one. So on that note, those who have just joined us just now, if you could just tell us a little bit about what you do, why you do it, and if you've got a killer question, and what I want you to do, we've got a very special guest today, the name of Farren Drury, but just give him some really nice, difficult ones.
Thank you. Not too difficult.
Yeah, a little bit of being respectfully rude to each other is great. So I'll need to go for it. Yeah, a little bit of introduction from myself, and then Chris, I'd love to you to introduce yourself, Farren. Business Growth Bureau was formed about 6 years ago, believe it or not. And for those of you who don't know me, one of the things I'm very passionate about is involving people within the organisation, whether it be clients, suppliers, customers, associates, partners, and staff, or ultimately it might be investors, is trying to think how you can make everyone feel good about that relationship. Because a lot of people do a lot of cheap talk about a win-win. Fundamentally, I think it's really important to think of all your stakeholders, whoever they might be, and just make them feel good about everything you do and demonstrate that you care. Now, Chris, it would be lovely if you could just give a little bit of an introduction into yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I'm Chris Cooper. Chris Cooper Business Elevation is my company, and I'm really passionate about helping leaders to elevate their thinking, particularly around the new world and what we're moving into, and also develop their people and build highly engaged workforces. But I also feel very passionate about these days around doing very worthy work and how we move our businesses to and our thinking to add value to the issues in the world, like environmental issues. So people, planet, as well as profit are important.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Farren, we'll come on to you just from in a moment. But Muriel, before we perhaps let you go more behind the scenes, as it were, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and the role you play?
Yeah, I'm Muriel. I'm Rupert's Client Relations Director. I work very closely with our clients, make sure they've got everything they need, give them the training, support as and when they need it. I also work closely with Rupert, doing bits and pieces for him. Obviously, he's particularly busy. Not that I'm not, but but I try and support him as much as I can.
Yeah, well, I've said repeatedly, and every business needs a Muriel. So Muriel just makes sure everything happens behind the scenes, which I'm very grateful for. And I think a number of you on this call have personally dealt with the hand of Muriel, and hopefully you felt much loved and appreciated for it. Very importantly, Farren, can you just, we're going to give you a much bigger introduction in just a moment, but could you just share a little bit about yourself to start with, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here. Great to work with Chris and Muriel and yourself, Rupert. We've known each other for a number of years. I was a soldier for 23 years, an army officer, and left that world in 2003. 2004, having adopted 2 young children, and went into the world of leadership development and coaching, and felt that I'd been leading for all the way through my army career, and then actually went on a very steep learning curve about actually learning more about myself and raising my own levels of self-awareness and actually my understanding of leadership. Learning, really looking back over the lessons from my time in the military and thinking actually when did things go well, what were the ingredients, and when they didn't go quite so well, and what were the ingredients, and really how I can help others to lead more effectively. And that was quite a steep learning curve, and that's been going on for the last sort of 15, 16 years, and I've got lots to talk to you about that, but that's my journey.
So thank you, Farren, and I can assure you Farren has got some amazing stories to tell. many of which we're not going to be able to hear about today because we probably require a few drinks to go through them all. But I think we'll all thoroughly enjoy the sharing of that. Just a little bit of a thought to start with. It's not. We couldn't not put anything other than the black slide up today in light of what's been happening in the US. Clearly, we need to acknowledge what's sort of going in other parts of the country, the world, and the injustices that occur. Unfortunately, it isn't just restricted to the black and ethnic communities. It is also many other minority groups as well. And the reason I just brought this up for a second is, unfortunately, I do believe we're in a world where in some cases, the poorer will possibly get a lot poorer still, and the very rich will get richer still. And unfortunately, it's times like this when you get these distortions kicking in. And what I'd like to see, and I hope and believe will happen, is the great passion and love that we all have for each other. If we look at the nurses and the NHS and the money that's been raised with Captain Tom and everything else like that, it's been a major inspiration. So for me, you've got almost two polar opposites. You've got forces that are going around the moment which are not so good, which I'm sure we probably are very familiar with, and others where you're getting great people coming together as great movements who want to make a big difference. Just a little bit of food for thought as well is, firstly, have you made sure that you and your family and business are well positioned to start to ride, on a bit more of a positive note, in a position to start to ride the wave as the market returns? So a lot of this is about getting yourself in a really good place to do that. I'm not going to go into bounce back loans and things like that particularly today, but what I would just simply say, remember, cash is always king. So if you think you're okay now, but you're a little bit worried what things might be in a few months' time, just make sure you're well funded to ride that through. And there are some very good sources of finance, as you know. But also, I'm not going to give any more information away at this stage at the moment, but a quick question around this as well is, would you be interested in being part of something special and having some insights into what you can put in place to put yourself in a really good position for the new world order? Now, the great thing is what we have got today is we've got Farren is going to be sharing a lot about his experiences in just a second. So be ready to be inspired. First time I heard Farren was 7 or 8 years ago when I invited him to speak one of our events. We had about 40 people there, and the room was totally transfixed. I still remember today how I personally felt and how many other people felt in the room. So, Farren, without further ado, I think this would be a really nice opportunity to introduce you. Would you like to just quickly explain a little bit what you plan to cover today? And then also what I'll do then is remove this slide so we can focus on what you're saying much more intimately. So over to you, Farren.
Well, thanks very much. I hope this isn't going to, I don't want it to be a lecture. I'm hoping it is going to be interactive and you're going to ask me questions. I've given these headings really based upon a lot of the learning I've had over a number of years. And as I described, leaving the military and thinking actually I understood an awful lot about leadership. I think I didn't really understand even the ethos until quite a long time into my military career of serve to lead, which was the ethos at Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy. And actually it took me quite a long time really, and then witnessing real powerful leaders in my life who actually got that and did that. I thought, okay, that's something I wish to emulate. And then leaving the military for the reasons I described earlier, I started to go on this steep learning curve because my personal background, would you like me to describe a little bit of that?
Yes, I think what would be good is, could you just give a very brief overview what these topics here, and then I'd love to hear your personal story. I think everyone would love to hear your personal story, Farren, if that's okay.
Well, the personal story really, I mean, has led to my thinking about actually how do we show up at our best, and to do that consistently is the responsibility of a leader, not just a leader, but I think if we can be in the lovely phrase of better people make better leaders, make better performers, make better, whatever it is. But how do you show up at your very best? And I would like to give you a few of the foundation steps that I would describe. I've said 5 steps. These really come from knowing where you've come from. What is your personal story? What are you proud of in your life? What have you overcome? What have you achieved? And that gives us strength and an anchor for when you face some tough times and you need to be resilient. Knowing what you stand for, your values, and trying to live up to them is number 2. And when you can live up to your values, actually what a confidence and strength it gives you. Sadly, if you don't and it disappoints you, that can lead to undermining your confidence and your ability really to show up at your best and to perform at your best. Thirdly, to know who you're doing it for and what you're doing it for. And this is the why that you've spoken about a lot, Rupert, and you, Chris. You know, the why of what are you doing it for? And I can talk about that in some detail. But if you can find the people that you really wish to be proud of you and actually try to live up and make them proud of you, you also have to have the courage and the humility to share your goals with them. And my God, they're there to help you. And so those are 3 of the core foundations. If you can get that foundation really right, then the 4th step is really to just know where you want to go. And that's sort of how to create the vision you want for your future. And then, of course, then you need to put a plan together to get there, the 5th step. So that's the 5-step foundation. And then actually I pull those all together in a series of winning routines, which were highlighted on that screen. So, and I do remember them quite well, Rupert. I know you've now tested me by taking them off the screen. That's fine. Routine. And so shall I come back to the winning routines in a moment? I think that's
Well, we're going to give you a chance to dive deep in just a minute, Farren. What I'd be really interested to hear as well is quite a bit about your personal story, because something that I remember had a very big impact for me was, I think, when you told us a little bit about your childhood and what really motivated you from the very beginning, what made you decide that you wanted to join the forces, how you then were able to have a bigger impact. But would you be able to sort of almost go back a little bit? Because I think people really buy into the why part of your story, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
So I a little lad of 6 years old, my father, and I've forgiven him. He came out of the war in Burma, so he was a vet. Had and dealt with some special forces stuff behind the lines in Burma. But when he came back to London, he met my mother, who had quite a story and had been sort of removed from, or sent from Dublin to London, having had a child out of wedlock. So they come together. Then they have this crazy life of drinking and partying and sort of really recovering from those 2 shocks. And then she has children. My mum has my elder sister and then my twin sister and I in 58 and 59. Within 6 years, my mother realized that actually living with an alcoholic and violent father was not a place of safety for us as children. And she had the courage really to get us away and took us from London to Cornwall. But at the age of 6, she turned to me and said, and put her hand on my head and said, "Right, son, you're now the man of the family. Look after your mother and your sisters." And to be frank, at 6 years old, you take those things very seriously. And of course, my sisters also took it quite seriously, because every time someone pulled their hair or called them a name or said something about the family, I was in like a flash. I only knew one way then, with my fists. And I was fighting, I was angry, I was lost, I was lacking in confidence. I really didn't know where I was. And I think I spent a lot of years masking that lack of confidence, that imposter syndrome, which actually can breed and stay with lots of people. That stayed with me for many years, and through my military career really led to me being very competitive, very sensitive. Can actually be an advantage sometimes to be that competitive in the military, but as a leader, I was great. I think I was great, and I think my soldiers would tell you that I was great working with them and working with my boys and the girls I had the privilege to lead. But what I wasn't so good at was working upwards and potentially across. The leaders I want now, and collaborative leaders, are people who are prepared to see the bigger picture. And I wasn't that. I was competitive and interested in my own part of a small organisation. Or a big organisation, but my small part of it was what was interesting to me. And it really took a bit of I left when we adopted the children. I went on this incredible journey of people raising self-awareness in me, giving me loads and loads of feedback, which actually was very uncomfortable to start with, I have to say. And it took me quite a while to get used to that. But I started to work on myself. And that was I started to, because of the children, I started to learn about attachment theory. I did a neuroscience lecture series, and I started to learn about behavioral change. And it was only it was about 7-8 years after that, someone, I've got to be quite careful in how I say this, but someone very close to me said they betrayed me. And in that moment, I realized that I had changed. The work I'd done on myself, the study I've done on neuroscience and emotional intelligence, the hard work I've done on myself, I'd realized I'd made a significant change, because in that moment, the words that came to me were dignity, love, and forgiveness. And that wasn't me. That was a surprise to me, but it was a lifesaver, because it actually saved relationships. It saved my sanity. It meant I was able to move forward in a resilient way. And I think actually I've moved on from there, and that's why I believe fundamentally, and the beauty of neuroscience and the plasticity of our brains is the more we work on ourselves, the more we can alter some of the behaviors that haven't served us, whatever our age is, and recreate new neural pathways which make us a better version of ourselves. It's all there, it's all within us, but sometimes things get on top of us and stop us being at our best. And I've been working on myself for some time, mind, but mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, social energy, and trying to find that right balance in order to show up at your best, and helping others to try and do the same. My why, if you like, particularly for leaders who have the privilege actually to lead other people and try to get the very best from them.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that sort of really struck out. And I mean, you were in the military for, is it 23 years in total? So you've been through some pretty amazing journeys through that, and also you've done some excellent work as well with the United Nations. Is it Bosnia as well, if I remember?
That was, yeah, I did 2 tours in Bosnia. The first was with my regiment at the time, was the Royal Gloucestershire, Berkshire and Wiltshire Regiment, and I was a company commander, infantry company commander, in the middle of a war. And it was a really tough tour. I mean, we had very interesting as well, incredible things that happen to you that you really do not expect to happen. One of the most challenging times, of course, was in the first week of that tour. We lost 4 soldiers in 2 separate incidents and 13 out of theatre. And that was a moment when the regiment had to really pull together and draw back on our history, on our values, on our ability, our willingness and desire to make those guys we lost and their families back home, and all of our families very proud of us. And we dug in to make a difference out in that country during that time. And we did some incredible work. Put about 5,000 in my company area. We put about 5,000 kids back into education with a look to the future. We rebuilt 5 schools. The guys did the incredible work, and it was a very, very special time. And then I went back and worked for the UNHCR as their military advisor for a bit in '97.
Right. I may have got this a little bit wrong, so please correct me, but I remember speaking with someone else who served in Bosnia as well. I may apologize if I got any of this wrong, but he was saying there was particular times when the United Nations, and they were perhaps instructed not to take certain types of action, but they almost saw scenarios where people were just slaughtered, but they almost had to see that actually going on, knowing they were actually instructed not to get involved. Now, is that anything that you've experienced with any of that, or on the whole, were you really empowered to make a real difference through your respective roles, role at the time? And
you're quite a controversial interviewer, Rupert, I noticed. And actually, to be frank, that caused obviously the Srebrenica incident, where the Dutch UN forces did not intervene. Now, I would like to say the British forces would react in a very different way. I don't want to decry how the Dutch forces behaved, because I think they were in a very, very difficult place at the time, very, very challenging. But what I do know is we had very clear rules of engagement, and that's been something that we've learned through the Yellow Card and Northern Ireland, and then coming into peace support operations and peacekeeping operations. We have very clear rules of engagement. And to be frank, if civilian people were being slaughtered or injured or damaged, then we had every right to put ourselves in danger in order to protect them. And I have to say, my soldiers did that. I was able to get aircraft from the Adriatic with HMS Invincible with aircraft aircraft in the Adriatic. I could get 2 above me with a forward air controller and a tactical air control party with me in my base. I could get them 2 above when we were being shelled, when the town was being shelled, and they were a threat and a deterrent to try and stop some of that going on. But no, I don't, you know, things happen, that's without a shadow of a doubt. We were overmatched during that UN period by the protagonists. That's the description of it. And therefore, there were some very challenging times, but I think we would try to put ourselves at risk if necessary in order to protect people.
From my first point of view, some of this must be, well, some of it, a lot of it must be really difficult to handle and very difficult to both manage internally within yourself, but also with your men and women as well. What would you say through some of those most challenging parts actually helped you see through? What was the steely determination from within that helped you to come through on the other side and help all those other people that you were working with?
Well, that's a lovely question. And I mean, I think, you know, we train really hard. The military train really hard. They train for, and it's a great old line, train hard, play easy. But we trained hard. The training we went through in building up to Bosnia and all the work we'd done previously during Northern Ireland tours and so on, it was to try and put you under increasing pressure, increasing until actually you feel confident you can handle most things. Then, of course, when you get into the reality of things, the things you've never trained for occur, but you've got that level of adaptability. So let me come back to you. What was your particular point you were asking me for?
I think it was just really was the steely determination that saw you through, because you must have had some quite dark moments with things that were going on.
Some of the worst things that happened, Rupert, I have to say, was when we were shelled and people were, and particularly civilians, were killed. One of the worst things happened when 3 young children found some unexploded ordnance and found a grenade. It blew up. 2 of them were killed instantly. The third was, one of my patrols was out. I was on the net back in our base, and the soldiers brought this child back in, and the section commander was blowing air into this child all the way back and trying to keep him alive. And he was a young child brought back in and subsequently died. And then all the parents came in and they were wailing and crying. And of course, that really hit the soldiers, particularly the soldiers who had children themselves. So, you know, there were some tough moments out there. How did we pull together? We sat down with them, we discussed it, we were open and honest about what our feelings were. We drew back on our history, we drew back on our friends and family back at home, and we wanted to make them proud. And I think there is a resilience in soldiers, which was self-leadership, and I'm a great believer in that. You know, they pulled themselves up, and we hopefully pull together to get us all through it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Also, I'm very keen to give Chris a chance to dig in and to ask some lovely questions as well, but also no doubt there's lots of them to come through in the feed as well. But also I'm very quite interested as well, because you went back to your childhood, to where you got to then when you were in the forces. Yeah. What was that light switch that suddenly was thrown to help you to become almost a completely different type of person and completely reinvent yourself? Because if you and I, when we met each other a while ago, and we've had conversations since, and you come across as so easygoing, laid back, unrattleable. You know, you seem to be one of these people that could never be rattled over anything. So you've been able to completely repackage yourself, reinvent yourself. What was that?
Well, what's that been about? I mean, I think recognizing that actually I probably wasn't having the impacts I always wanted to have, and that was when I left. You know, within the military, I did pretty well. You know, to command a battalion in Northern Ireland for 2 years, and and in fact, fortunately, be recognised, through that Bosnia tour and so on. You know, lots of things that happened well, and when I talk to my soldiers, we're all connected. We've got a great Facebook gathering of the farmers' boys from my 1st regiment, the Royal Irish Regiment. We're very close, and that's brilliant. And I had a great time. But I know when I look back, I could have led more effectively, more up than down. I think I did a bloody good job as a company commander, as a commanding officer, looking after my soldiers. but I don't think I led particularly well upwards or influenced that way. And I was too sensitive. The light bulb happened really, I guess, with the children, how I wanted to show up as a better person, a better version of myself, how I wanted to be a decent example to them. And actually the feedback I was getting from a brilliant company, Leading Initiatives Worldwide, as it was called then, but the fellow colleagues in that business and subsequently directors of that business, they helped me. They taught me. I then had a coach. I was taught how to coach. I was being coached, and that just opened up so much to me. And then I read and I studied and I learned, and it was just a journey of behavioural change. And once you see that that change happening, it's just so refreshing and so liberating. So I wanted to carry on that journey and help other people with it, and that's what I really get the greatest reward from now.
Yeah, well, that's a question. Chris, I'd love to hear what Chris has got to ask as well. And any questions?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, listening to all of that, when you were in the military, I imagine there were times that you really had to manage your fear and through the experiences that you went through. And I've read a lot about Bosnia, and it was a very challenging. You were peacekeeping. The Americans were more active, so you had that to deal with as well. And I wonder, having been through that fear, now you've come into the kind of civvy sort of world, whether actually, because you've experienced that fear and built the resilience to it, whether things aren't quite as fearful for you now. But also, what I think is interesting is you've completely adhered to the notion of love, and rather than fear, love, and how it all sex. And I just wonder what your reflection on that was really.
Well, I'm glad you've used the love word, Chris. I think we should spread the love of damn sight more. There's no limits to it, and actually caring about people, being compassionate to people, sharing loving kindness is a very powerful thing to do in the world. With regard to fear, there were times, of course, when we had shells coming into our base. I mean, I'll tell you one very funny story. We were shelled on one occasion where 2 surface-to-air missiles, and one of the lads who might be watching this, Charlie Brown, was on the roof of our thing. I had 14 people in a room. I was giving an orders group, as it was described, and this surface-to-air missile went off, and every window came in. The whole place shook. There were 14 people trying to get out of the room at the same time to get into a collective protection shelter. So I get in there and I get on the net to our observation post up on the mountain, watching the confrontation line. And I said, "Bravo, Mike 8, 0 Alpha, can you tell me what was going on there?" And he said, "Now, sir, this missile came up in the air. It launched out of Dorni Vakuvu, where we came across, but and exploded just above you." I said, "Yeah, I know that." I said, "What was it?" He said, "I don't know, sir, but there's another one coming." And he counted it into me. And I couldn't tell anyone. I pulled my helmet down and I clenched. You know where I'm clenching. And I thought, this is going to hurt. And it went off, but 100 meters down the road in the cemetery. And everyone was already dead, thank God. So that was a fearful moment. And that's so you're right, Chris. Perspective. When I go into briefings, when you're pitching for a piece of work, or you're going in and seeing senior people, I don't feel quite the same sort of twitch that perhaps I did at that. Well, definitely not at that. I did at that moment. I don't feel that same level of fear. You're absolutely right. You get a little bit inured to it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, it's like raising your kind of conscious and experience in the bigger picture of what's really important. What's really important. When people are living and dying, that's really important, isn't it? Yeah. But actually, being in a pitch. No one's going to die from being in a pitch, even if you don't get the business. So actually, you must just do your best.
Yeah, that's a great way. And also, sometimes things go wrong. And, I love the idea. I mean, there's a great quote, Eisenhower, he planned the D-Day landings, or his staff did. But he said, plans are worthless. Planning is everything. So you can plan for all these things and then things go wrong. If you can handle in the moment just to smile, you go, no plan survives contact with the enemy. So I've been in briefings. We were on a pitch once where the board we put up on the wall fell off, halfway through the pitch, and we just laughed. We just had to go with it. And the guy who's the CEO, he laughed as well. And of course, that created a lovely atmosphere, and we got the business.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's about being human again as well, isn't it? Which is important. Yes. So, Chris, I think we've got a few people made some comments. Actually, are anybody you able to pull any?
I think. Well, this one, there's a comment here, and it leads very nicely to where you came from. Was the first part, Farren, you were going to talk about. But this one, I think, might help in terms of. This one might help in terms of moving through your process from first part with where you came from. The second you said you were going to talk about was your values. So I wonder if there's a nice fit for this within your structure.
Well, I'm giving away a lovely bit of IP here, Mike, or Michael. I'm not sure. And you're in Warminster, which is only up the road from me. I'm in Westbury. So we should get together. I'll share this all with you. But I do an exercise on values with people, which I learned in my old business. And it's actually asking people to identify their personal values. And I could tell you more about the detail, but essentially identify their personal values and then slowly take them away from them until they have to prioritize. There's a great saying, and I can't remember who said it, but you only really know your values when you have to make choices. And this is forcing people to make choices until you get the last one or two or three of them, and then say, okay, what is it like when you step on one of your, I do to ask people when someone else tramples on your values, how do you feel? And most people really react quite passionately, rightly, because it's almost a personal attack on them. Your values about how you identify yourself, what you aspire to be. But then how do you feel when you step on one of your own values? And that's a pretty horrible feeling. And I've been there and I didn't like myself. And then how do you feel when you do your best, when you can look yourself in the eye, when you look in the mirror and say, how am I doing my best to live up to my values? And when you can do that, how strong and confident you can feel. So that's the exercise I do, and that's how I introduce values. And it's a very, very powerful session. So, Mike, let's get in touch.
We've got some other ones there, Chris.
I think that was probably the main one. We've had Renato has been commenting about his Bosnian experiences.
So should we bring up
a couple of here from Renato?
Yeah.
Let's ask me something.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think there's probably, how do you prioritize purpose with values? So that's,
as well, isn't it? So no, that's good.
Well, question.
Yeah, it's a question there. How do you prioritize purpose with values?
Wow, that is a good.
And I just sort of link to that. I kind of asked a bit of a question. You Farren, you realise that dignity, love, and I think you said commitment.
Forgiveness.
Sorry, forgiveness. Sorry, forgiveness. Yeah, dignity, love, and forgiveness, which I think are probably your values. When you were in the military and it sounded like you maybe had a bit of a values disconnect. Do you think there's you had to discover what those were first, or do you think you already had them deeply ingrained within you, but you didn't realise it?
Well, that's again. It was only when I left the army and I was being interviewed to join this leadership business that someone asked me, so what are your values? And I thought, well, I hadn't really thought about that. Because most people don't necessarily have to think about what their values are. I think it's really good to do that. But most people would be easily told what their values are by their very behavior. And, I have to say, I've got over here the Commando Medal, which has a set of values around it, which I was fortunate enough to win when I did the Commando course. I was in the Marines for a couple of years and did the Commando course and was awarded the Commando Medal at the end of it. And it's got a beautiful set of values around it, which I think determination, leadership, unselfishness, cheerfulness, and leadership. I think, did I say that already? Anyway, there's 5 values around the outside, and it's a magic. Really, I mean, it was very, very special to me. And even then, I didn't necessarily say, right, that's what I'm going to live. I love the idea of living up to the commando spirit. That was what you got that medal for. Not many people got it. And I think values are critical, and if the more we can bring them to the fore and try to live up to them, I think is really, really important. I don't know whether I answered your question, Chris, actually, to be honest. I went on about medal.
Because I'm mindful I'm missing him out of the conversation now. I could chat to you.
I think Tom's got one there, hasn't he? Is that a question we got from Tom there? Don't you find?
Oh, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Don't you find the civilian world frustrating, possibly an anticlimax? Listen, Tom. I mean, Tom. You know, you're clearly experiencing that. There's a difference. But what I think, I don't find an anticlimax because I love people. And I love working with people, and it doesn't matter where they are. If they're doing, I'm much more interested in doing working with people who are doing something meaningful, and you know, who are actually making some difference in society. That you know, that turns me on, and it does Chris. I know that, so I like working with those people. You know, I have worked with corporate bankers, but at the end of the day, they're still people, and they have families, and they have concerns, and I love that aspect of it. So I don't find it an anticlimax. What I rail against is people who say the emotional intelligence stuff, the dealing with people, those are the soft skills. They're not the soft skills. They are the hardest things you can do. And if you can help people do that more effectively, then there's never an anticlimax. You get an excitement out of working and seeing people grow and develop and get better. So I haven't found that frustrating or annoying. I mean, occasional bits of it. It's different in the military. There's no question about that. But I think if we don't adapt, we don't survive.
It's really interesting as well, because you talk quite a bit about behaviour and language, values, and intelligence.
Yeah.
You sort of lead on really from there into sort of energy and impacts, and you refer to being properly selfish. It's interesting because we're always taught not to be selfish, but in reality, of course, we're all inherently selfish, if I can put it that way, because we're all very good at perhaps thinking about ourselves, even though we shouldn't. But I'm really interested to know what you mean by that. Could you just expand a little bit more about a particular point, if that's all right?
Well, you're only picking on one of the winning routines that I speak about, Rupert, because I didn't actually get to giving you all of the 5. It doesn't matter. Let me focus on this one. You know, choose your energy and your impact. And the reality is, why do I say properly selfish? It's a bit of the metaphor that people use on getting on an aircraft, and not that we're going to do that for a little while, but is when the oxygen masks come down, you put your own on first, because then you're in a better position to help someone else. And being properly selfish means unless you look after yourself truly effectively, unless you can show up at you may well burn yourself out. You certainly won't show up at your very best. And if you are a leader, you have the responsibility to look after your people, not just your people, but your family, your friends. And therefore, being properly selfish means look after yourself in terms of your physical energy, your emotional energy, your mental energy, your spiritual energy, your social energy. And I use an acronym which I drew from some of the Olympians I was lucky enough to work with, is SHED. Get in the shed, which stands for get enough sleep, hydrate properly, plenty of water, not always beer or wine or gin, Rupert. Exercise, making sure you get the right amount of exercise, and we have to be disciplined about that. And finally, have the right diet. So get in the shed. It's a lovely, easy acronym to remember.
Oh dear, you've already made me feel really bad. So that bicycle again and go on a diet and everything else we should all be doing. So now I've already skipped several of these on here, Farren. Yes. Except you told me there was gin in there earlier on. But what some of these earlier points, Farren, which I haven't given you a chance to go through. Obviously, I don't want to spoil the context of everything that's been shared today. What have I missed so far in terms of what we have covered, as it were? And Karen, thanks for that.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, thumbs up. So the winning routines idea is, and I've learned this working with some really great people, and I've learned it from them and together. It's been a real collaborative exercise. But I put 5 together. So winning routine number 1: choose your mood. That we can do at any time or any of the day or night. We're going into a tough meeting. We're dealing with the children. We're coming at home after a tough day. And if we can choose the right mood, then the resonance that we have with other people, the ripple effect that we have, can be so much more positive. And it's a discipline. So choose your mood. The second one is choose your story, winning routine number 2. It's actually written on that board back there from some of the work I've been doing online with people. But choose your story about yourself. Your proud stories, the bits that you've overcome, the things you've achieved, the anchors that give you strength. Choose the stories about yourself. Choose a story about others. How do you impact on others? By letting them believe that you believe in them, because you do. So choose the right stories about good, people are good people in there. Assume positive intent, and get the best. You get the best from people, and we can all remember the teacher who believed in us, or the work boss who believed in us. Give us that chance to choose your story about others and resonate positively with them, and choose a story about situations. The secret, if you like, you get what you think. So that's winning routine number 2. Winning routine number 3, choose your behavior, and that's the values bit. Try to live up to your values, but also your behavior is also your language. How do you use positive, solution-focused language, not negative, denying away from goal language? Using toward language can help people. Our behavior, as well as living with our values, and understanding emotional intelligence, neuroscience helps a lot with that. And we've just spoken about choosing your energy and impact. Get in the shed, be properly selfish, and show up at your best. And finally, choose to be a winning leader. And that's my sort of catch-all, really. How do we show up as a winning leader? What do we need to do to enable our people to do their best work? The great Lao Tzu quote, which a very old friend of mine did a program with for years, used to use, which is, he said, a leader is one who at the end of the day, his people say they did it themselves. What's our role, our job as a leader? To create the conditions for our people to do their best work. And I think that's a very powerful thing to do. And that can capture all, setting those conditions, giving and receiving feedback well, being a leader coach. So a whole bunch of stuff in that aspect of winning routine number 5.
That's really powerful stuff. And you talk a lot about, you've got down here about your why and for who and for what. It'd be really interesting if you could elaborate and expand a little bit on that, Farren.
Now I'm hoping I won't get emotional, because, I described to you how my wonderful mum, who died in 1998, actually, she died 2 years after we actually discovered that she'd had this daughter in Ireland in 2000. But, when she took us away, and she was an absolute rock, and she believed in me, and she set ambition in me, and probably, sometimes that was a little bit of a double-edged weapon, I have to say, because I set myself ridiculous goals and nearly killed myself trying to achieve them. But what I know, and when I was doing my coach training, one of the coaches said, who was coaching me at the time, and another guy was watching, he said, Farren, what are you doing it all for? Bloody hell. It really hit me quite hard, and I was emotional. I said, I'm doing it to make my mum proud. And we were in tears, the 3 of us, like 3 grown men in tears. Ridiculous. I'm a big baby, I know. I accept that. I'm doing it to make my mum proud. And he said to me, Farren, don't you get it, mate? I said, what? He said, she's already proud of you. And you know what? In that moment, that was a massive liberation. That was a moment I thought, yeah, God, why wouldn't she be? But so what's my why? It's my why has been trying to, show up at my very best, be the best version of me I can be, but also help other people to be the same. Ultimately, making my mum proud is there, but being proud of myself and helping other people to really show up and shine at their best. There's a beautiful poem of Margaret Williamson, I think it is, which in it says, you have a responsibility to show up, to shine at your best. By doing that, you almost have a duty to do that. By doing that, you actually give other people permission to shine themselves.
Yeah.
And I love that way of looking at it. And so that's what I try to do and help people to really show up at their best.
Yeah, excellent. I'm going to be very unfair here, Farren, and this might be a curveball question, so I apologise.
I knew there was one coming.
Yeah. But as a point of interest, if you had to describe what is your core purpose as a word, a noun, a verb and a noun, so 2 words, possibly 3, because obviously you're very deep into yourself, and you're going to completely recreate yourself as being for a force of good or power for good. But what would you say those 2 or 3 words actually are, which really describe you from within, and what's helped to see you through on the other side?
I feel like I'm going to end up using an old British Army advert, which is to be your best, which I feel is a little bit of a cheat.
What goes really deep, which has made you are what you are today?
Well, the essence, my essence, is love. Okay.
Nice.
It's how you share. It's how you bring other people with you. It's what you give out to the world. Is what you give back. And so if I'm going to, and I was challenged on this once before to imagine my essence, and it's quite a challenging word. And I had a visualization of a very powerful image, but it is about the power of love.
Nice. That's nice. And I best get you seen that at a very personal level with a partner and your current partner, as it were, but also in times of battle or war as well. In the sense that's where you have seen real men and women perhaps give themselves and their lives up in the interest of others. And no doubt you've seen that being expressed numerous times throughout your life in different ways. So I can see how that must be very powerful.
Can I just ask, do you think, Farren, I also remember going through the sort of NLP sort of journey, and which you may well have been through first. I think my master practitioner, I think it was, where we all did this thing. I think it was a parts integration or something. It was cool. But actually what happened in the room was everybody, when they took all the layers of the onion off, everybody, and nothing else was left. It all ended up in terms of love being at the absolute core essence of everybody. And you're kind of almost in that vein of fluidity of spirit or whatever it is. Do you think that actually you've got to your core and your kind of essence, that if most people listening here just peel back all the layers of what's important, they would also eventually get back? There'd be nothing else left but love. It's the kind of pure.
I love what you're saying, Chris. Honestly, if there's one thing that we will take away from COVID, and it's my hope, is that actually we do recognize what's really important. And I think that I hear from loads and loads of people now who are still going through lockdown in some respects, but and been working from home, but they found time. They found time for their families, for the things that are important, their friends. They've connected with them on Zoom and other media. So what is important? Yes, I totally agree with you. Let's bring it right back to the essence. And I think that's a good hope for post-COVID.
And in some ways, that's our journey, isn't it, for us, and to help rather than fear, which enables people to, amass things, amass revenue, exploit the world's resources for their own safety and security. Actually, there's enough to go around, and if we can help people to realise that actually it all runs on that, it runs on organisations run better where love is present, and rather than fear. And that's where you get engagement, and that's where you get engagement with your family. And so we've this is part of the mission, isn't it?
Oh, we're singing off the same sheet, no question about that. And I've spent a lot of time working in leadership in crisis, and it's interesting. The Chinese symbol for crisis is both danger and opportunity. And when an exercise I used to run with people would say, okay, well, let's just put across danger is fear, and let's put across opportunity is hope, and hence the love. And then I'd say to people, okay, let's just work out what are the behaviors we see when fear abounds, and what are the impacts of that, and what are the behaviors we see when hope and love exist, and what are the impacts of that. And it's a very powerful possibility. Now, I always come back to the beautiful Stockdale paradox. Do you know the Stockdale paradox? I don't know whether you know it, but Admiral James Stockdale caught in the Hanoi Hilton. But the essence of it is be realistically hopeful. This tough time we're going through in COVID, it's not going to go away for some time. We're going to deal with it, but we will get through it. We just have to deal with some tough stuff first. Yeah. And hope is a really critical thing, and love. So I'm completely with you, Chris.
Thank you.
I missed some of the comments there because I was so.
Question there or comment. In fact, this would probably need to be the last one actually. But have you got anything you want to add there, Farren, that Valerie's just raised on the screen there? Can you see that? Okay. Is there anything you feel you'd like to add to what's already been said? Right.
Hang on. I think I almost need my glasses to understand this. So challenging coronavirus times for most people. How does Farren apply his positivity, inform, help others with resolving with respect to their humanity any past traumas people in team have? Okay, I think you probably typed that quite quickly, because that's so I guess.
How do you deal with trauma, I think, is the question.
Yeah, in essence, yes. Well, it's a massive question. It's a massive question, and there are sort of proper counsellors and so on out there who handle it. But from my perspective, the positivity is actually, we have all been through tough things. There's tough things that have occurred in our life, some more traumatic than others. And I know my son went through some serious. My adopted son went through some serious trauma as a 3-year-old boy, and it's affected him every single day. So I don't undermine these things, and I think positivity can take you so far. But I think sometimes you need real good help and the willingness to accept that help if you're going to come through significant trauma in your life. But I guess I have the faith and the belief that we can train ourselves, we can train our minds, just as much as we'll train our bodies and etc. But we can train our minds, and that's the most exciting thing I think I can offer in how we approach the challenges we face in life.
I think the question was about positivity. How with your positivity can you help others? So I guess in the workplace, and we come back into the workplace, and there'll be people there who've lost loved ones due to coronavirus. There'll be people who are maybe suffering with mental health kind of challenges, and how can we help through our positivity? How can we help people to deal with their traumas? And that's probably
yeah. Well, I think there's a lovely saying that we are like Velcro for negativity, and we're like Teflon for positivity. The negativity bias is drawn from our reptilian brains and our sort of survival instincts on the Serengeti when we were cavemen, and it's still with us today. So positivity, we need to feed that really, in a very determined way, in a very structured way, if you like, feed the positive and try to draw on those things to give yourself resilience when you're dealing with tough times, I guess, is where I come from. And I've dealt with people who've dealt with those sorts of traumas, and in teams as well. I've gone through very difficult places, but you come through it through hope and living up to your values and trying to be the best person you can and the best team you can possibly be, and caring for each other and supporting each other and demonstrating a degree of empathy.
Yeah. No, thank you. Obviously, in the last few minutes, we need to sort of wrap up in just a moment. But Farren, I just want to say that your contribution today has been phenomenal. But also, I just want to say as well that Farren has invested huge sums of money, and he's duly embarrassed, not embarrassed, but I haven't pressed him on the subject, but he's put a lot of money into an app, which we're looking certainly to get involved with, all being well with Farren. It's called Go Make It Yours, Farren. Is that right? Do you want this?
Make It Yours is my brand, and Go Make It Yours is the sort of strap line, because I think Make It Yours had gone. But Go Make It Yours is the website, www.gomakeityours.com. Yeah, and it's a powerful tool.
Because obviously it's a great app, and obviously we're looking to see how we can embed this within what we're doing, as you know. But tell us a tiny bit about the app, because I think people will be quite interested.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's called the Visual Success Map. Is the product of the app, where you're trying to present a visual representation of a set of stepping stones to a goal. So it's goal setting, but actually then recognizing that you can connect. I blatantly stole the concept from the military. It was called the campaign plan schematic, where you put a sort of a visual representation of a major campaign, but you've got lots of detail behind the major stepping stones taking you along the journey. And the fact that it's an app, and the fact that no plan survives contact with the enemy is dynamic. You can change it, but you can also chart your progress along that journey through photographs, through videos. So it for me, a sort of CV of the future, an online version of it, a storytelling capability, a planning capability, which is funky and fun and really great when you're working with other people in a collaborative way. So yeah, have a look at it. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, no, we would certainly say we look at it for our clients, as you know. So Farren, thank you very much for that. Also, we may come back for a couple of final questions at the very end, but let me just share my screen for a moment. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. Moving on to the final few minutes. What we're going to be doing is actually, can you see it? So I don't
We haven't yet. No.
then we've got to press that button there. There we go. Got it. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about briefly for the last couple of minutes is really what's coming up in terms of our 5-day challenge. Now, we've got a bit of a surprise for you next week, actually. Does anyone remember who talks about his major adventures he's carried out in his lifetime? I think it's 5 or 6 times up Everest, been caught up on Everest in the middle of an earthquake. He's done over 50 expeditions. A great guy. Well, I think a number of you have already been on this before will know him. Chris very kindly introduced me to Neil. Neil has very kindly offered to take part in something starting next week. And what we're doing for next week's show is going to do a bit of a pre-launch for the 5-day challenge. And what we're going to do is an expert panel. So Chris very kindly was volunteered earlier on today, just because while he was in the middle of the process of doing his lunch, but I caught him then. But basically, we're going to have a little bit of an expert panel and looking at a number of different things. And as part of that, it will be very much leading into this. So this is what we class as a 5-day challenge. And what we're going to talk about there is sort of market insights and returning to the new normal. 12 strategies you can put in place for growing a successful business. We'll be looking at a lot around resilience, which, of course, Neil's contributed greatly to. And your tribes. Now, tribes, I feel personally, are very important because these are all people who are keen supporters of what you do, I believe what you're doing, or either potentially your customers, your clients, or maybe very strong advocates. And then what we talk about, the social selling blueprint, and then determining what's now for the rest of 2020 and what happens after that. And there's going to be lots of fun competitions. We're going to invite you to a closed Facebook group. It's completely free of charge. And we'll be talking about that a bit next week, but in the context of what's here. And Neil's very kindly sharing lots of his knowledge and expertise. Chris, we talk a lot around leadership as well. So I'm sure it'll be a really good session. And just so you know how to enter the 5-day challenge, we are asking people to pre-register. We've already had about 30 people register already. The way you get to it is very simple. If you just type in that URL, there is businessgrowthbureau.com/challenge, or alternatively, you can get to it by going to the Learn More drop down on the menu, choosing 5-day challenge. It'll take you about 60 seconds to complete. It's just mainly so we know who's wanting to get involved and we can make sure you're fully part of the competition. And then moving on from that, if you want to make sure you're taking part in future live streams, you can very easily go to the events tab on our website, which is businessgrowthbureau.com, as you may know, and then you can choose, just confirm the time zone. When you book the session, you can either choose continue, which just books you in for the one session, or if you choose recurring, it will set you up each week, so you'll get reminded, and it saves you having to re-register each week. All you then need to do is confirm your attendance. And we very much recognise that it is a lonely journey running a business, and we're here to support in your growth. You can also set a reminder in Facebook, and also if you're on YouTube with us today, you can choose the subscribe option. Clearly, if you like what you're doing, then do feel free to share that with your friends. We're keen to get the message out there, and we're very grateful for your contribution. Finally, here are the contact details if you want to contact any one of us. Farren's web address there is gomakeityours.com, and his phone number, and also there are our email addresses. So basically, if anyone's got any final questions, we can obviously wrap up on that now. So do feel free to interject. But what I would just like to say at this point, I'm very grateful for you joining in. We've got a lovely Muriel join us in for the last few seconds. So thank you very much, everyone. Farren, have you got any closing comments you would like to make for everyone that's still here, or Chris or Muriel? Farren, any closing thoughts?
So very grateful for the invitation. Great to be with you. Really grateful for the questions. Quite challenging ones at times as well. So that that was, yeah, I'll sort you out later on. But no, that was great. Really enjoyed it, and I'm grateful. And I guess my parting message: if we can work at trying to be the best version of us, then we're going to have a better, happier, more fulfilled life. And I wish everyone well in striving to develop themselves in as many ways as they can.
Lovely, Farren, and thank you. Now, Muriel, let's not forget, we're going to come to Chris in just a second. Muriel, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, really powerful stuff, Farren. Thank you so much. And quite emotional. I have my tissue. That was absolutely great. Thank you. Really good.
Which part moved you the most, as a matter of interest?
The fact that the love aspect, sharing love, because like Farren, I'm very passionate about people, and I'm starting to well up already. And you know, your mum, trying to make your mum proud of you, which is a great bond you obviously had, like I had with my mum. So very powerful stuff.
Right.
Thanks.
Focus off you, Muriel, because we're embarrassed now. No, Chris, over to you. What thoughts have you got?
I think you know, what you said, Farren, like, you know, really very, very powerful. But I think what I'd focus everyone's attention on too is what, you know, who Farren is being, and it just, you know, you just feel that in the way that you've behaved through this interview, and your engaging stories and how heartfelt it is. If we can all introduce some of that in our own way into the best way that we're being, then that can only be good. And we need to, you know, we need to be doing that at this time, and through who we're being, we will help people, and that will inspire them maybe to also reach into being the best versions of themselves too. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Chris.
I think on that note, I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for taking part, especially Farren, for your very kind contribution, and Muriel, who just helps everything work behind the scenes, and Chris, what would I do without you? So very grateful, mate, as always, just making sure this works seamlessly. But thank you very much. With this, I really appreciate you joining us, and look forward to see you all on next week's show. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.